How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm okay. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. A
Yeah,
pleasure.
we're getting ready to go back to school. You saw my face, right? So, yeah, classes start on Monday. No, actually, meetings and all of that, and then classes the following week. So,
And is there any excitement or any apprehension? How would you describe it?
well, I mean, I've kind of been cooped up in my house. I've been teaching. I'm teaching at two universities. I'm teaching at Florida Memorial University, and I'm also teaching at the University of Miami.
Okay.
And I taught a course I love to, and I love to say it like this: the evolution of rock. You
Hmm.
know, all summer long. It's been fun, and small class. And actually, one of my students went to the Olympics.
Oh, wow.
She was a diver, but actually not representing the United States, representing Sweden. And
See.
she did very well. She came very close to the semifinals, lost it by 9 tenths of a point. So, but it was fun. It was fun. I did it online as opposed to doing it in person. But we're going back in person at both places.
Wow. So I'm guessing there's a little bit of it's kind of like you haven't been doing something for a while and then you jump back in.
Well, all right. Here's the thing with me. I tell people this, and and it's a little strange, but I have no off switch in my head.
Ah.
I'm always doing something. When COVID hit last year, a lot of the uh, big centers like the Arts Center down here and Miramar Cultural Arts Center, a lot of these places I do something with, on some level. And they immediately said, we need content, right? Because nobody could go anywhere. So I had to think, and I said, got it. So I did stuff for kids. I read books. I put music to books, and I read interesting books to kids. I did workshops. I did online performances. I did, kind of collaborative performance things where I got kids that I work with and put them together. And so I found stuff. I've been busy the entire
Well, to paraphrase David Letterman, there is no off switch on the genius button.
time. I'm not a genius. I'm just someone that I have to I have to constantly be creative.
Right.
That's just who I am. And if I'm not doing it, I do it vicariously through my students, but I have to be busy. That's who I am. So.
Well, I think that's a good place to introduce you. So, the woman that I'm joined with, this is Nicole Yarling, I'm with, and I think she's somebody who can't be defined by a single talent. She's a violinist, a teacher, as she's been saying, a songwriter, a singer, a performing artist. She's worked as a recording artist. She's originally from Brooklyn, and these days she moved to Florida back in the 80s. She's worked with everyone from Dr. John, Dizzy Gillespie, Jimmy Buffett. She had her own group, which, if you can find these recordings, you will really be happy. Little Nicky and the Slicks.
Yay.
So, thank you so much for making the time to talk to me. It's a real honor.
Well, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Now, with all those things that I've listed, and you've said you got to stay active. What would you say you're happiest doing?
Being creative. I know that sounds evasive, but as long as I'm working on a project now called Voice of the Nation, and hopefully it'll be in person. But it's basically taking a bunch of songs that I think are cool and that are make a social statement. Like I did a new rendition of Big Yellow Taxi, and but the songs are varied, uh, but my renditions of these songs. So I think that that's the best way to describe me. I, as long as what I enjoy most is being creative. I love to sing, I love to play, I love to write, and I love working with kids. But as long as I can do that creative thing, I think that's what makes me happiest. Hope I
Now,
answered your question.
what's that?
I said, I hope I answered your question.
I think so. I think so. Now, that's an interesting place to you mentioned Joni Mitchell, and I think she's one of the best all-around artists out there. But the music that you grew up with, who really, really got you going? You made you think, wow, this is music.
Well, my dad played, and there was an organ. At one point, there was a piano in my house, and there was another point there was an organ in my house. So there was always music in my house. I grew up listening to everything, just like most of us or people my age listen to rock and roll, jazz, and it's funny because my dad was a jazz musician, and there were records in my house. And I would sit down, and I remember specifically listening to Dexter Gordon. And there was an album called Dexter Plays the Horn. I think that's what it's called. And it was a little boy on the front of the cover with the saxophone. And I'm not a great visual artist, but I would listen to the music and lay on the floor and kind of copy this picture. And I didn't listen to jazz because I thought it was hip. I listened to it because it was just, I liked the sound of it. I didn't understand it at the time, but I treated it the same way I treated the Beatles or I treated the Supremes or whatever was playing on radio. I just love music. So, yeah.
And what would you say? What would you say was your first instrument?
Uh, you're going to ask me this. It was my toy piano.
Oh, really?
I got a toy piano when I was a kid. And I wrote my very first song on my toy piano. And I was talking to somebody about this the other day. It was called I Cannot Fly. And it only had four notes. I cannot fly. I cannot. That was the whole song.
That was
So
the
that was
first one.
actually my first instrument. I mean, it's silly, but and then I got a violin. Um, through public schools. That's when the music programs were pretty strong in public schools, and they wouldn't let us bring the instruments home initially, but they let us bring the books home. So I sat, and this is kind of bizarre, but that's how much of a geek I was. I read through the entire book, and like memorized the notes. So I guess my voice replaced the violin. Then when they gave me the instrument, that it was over. I took it home and I took it apart and I put it back together. I figured out how to do that. Yeah, so my very first instrument was the piano, toy piano. I'm a terrible piano player, by the way. And then the violin. And then I always sang. So
You know, to say that you sing is an understatement.
uh,
I want to tell you something. It was years ago. I had the actor Jeff Bridges on as a guest. And he was in a movie when he was very young called The Last Picture Show. Great movie. And so I was digging through my many albums and I found this band that you were the lead vocalist on this track. You sang a song called The Last Picture Show. And I remember we played that as a part of the show because that was one of his first movies. And it was just a little connection, just two titles that were alike. And I'll still remember I was recording and producing the show with a guy named Jeff Pike, and we finished the track, and he said, "Who is this singing?" He said, "This is just," and he's a great singer too. He said, "This is one of the best singers I've ever heard." And
you're
I said, "Well,
kidding.
this is Nicole Yarling." Who
Oh,
are?
that's great. No, you know why it's great?
Why is
Because
it?
I'm gonna tell the guy that wrote the song. I worked with, and I still do. I work with him now, maybe once in a while, like once a month. Izzy Blair, great guitar player. and he asked me to be a part of this project. I wrote one song on this project. It was called The Buzzwords.
Right.
And oh my God. So I'll tell him that Jeff Bridges liked what he heard. That's wow. I had no idea. That is so cool. Thank
Well,
you.
the engineer, I have to be totally honest, it was the engineer who said ab- about your vocals, not Jeff Bridges.
Oh, oh I got excited. No, but so thank the engineer. Oh my
Oh
God.
yeah, and I was saying that he's a great singer as well. But I a great song also, great song. The
Thank you. And I'll
buzzwords.
thank you for Lindsay. Lindsay's a very good songwriter and a great guitar player as well. So
So,
wow.
who are the singers that have influenced you the most?
It's good. Here we go. It'll be kind of bizarre. Mostly men. As far as jazz singers, Etta Jones, not Etta James, because when I say that, everybody thinks Etta James. Etta Jones, who was from the kind of the Billie Holiday school of singing. Great singer. I got to meet her a couple of times. Wonderful person. And Donny Hathaway, everyone's favorite singer. Um, just an amazing voice and an amazing soul. And everybody loves Stevie. But the toss up between the two, I'm more of a Donnie person than I am a Stevie person. I love both, don't get me wrong. But I'm definitely more, there's something that Donny Hathaway does. And of course, my mentor, Joe Williams, the jazz singer. Um, I'm knocked out by people that when I hear them, they're unique sounding, and their voice. There's some. It doesn't have to be the greatest voice on the planet, but there's something about them that reaches out and touches me. You know what I mean? And it stops me in my tracks. And so I search around for that kind of, and that's what I tell my students all the time. You have a great voice, but really reach towards trying to be you, not somebody that, I've never tried to imitate anyone. And the best compliment that I've ever gotten was when somebody said, I heard you and I knew it was you. You don't have to like me.
Mm-hmm.
But just the fact that it's really important to me, the unique voice. But my favorites were probably Etta Jones, Donny Hathaway. I love Ella, Joe Williams, Stevie Wonder. There's others, but those are the people that probably influenced me the most.
Would it be possible to define what it is that makes a great singer? Because I like what you were saying about uniqueness. There's some people you just hear them sing and it's sometimes you think, now this person, a lot of people wouldn't necessarily call them a great singer, but there's still something. It's like, wow.
Yeah, I'm a real big Neil Young fan, you know? And it's funny because, or you think of Dylan and people go, it wasn't the greatest voice in the world. It's not, to me, I guess what I said. If the person, it's unique and the person reaches out and speaks to me. You know what I mean? With whatever their story is. They're a good, I think the best way to describe it is they're great storytellers. You know what I mean?
Mm,
It's like, it doesn't have to be the most incredible sounding, but like I said, I teaching all these years, I've heard some amazing singers where their voices are so unique, they just fall out of their mouths. They don't have to work at singing. And I'm bored because there is nothing. You know what I mean?
right.
They're so self-absorbed that they think that everyone is just going to automatically accept their greatness. But if you do that and it feels insincere, people know the difference. People know sincerity and people read sincerity. So it's uniqueness, sincerity, and a story. I guess that's the best way to describe what makes a good singer for me.
The one thing that we can say about the first song that you wrote is that it has endured because you remember it all these years later.
Oh God, yes. I'm gonna
But
go
tell
get a toy piano and play it for you.
but tell us about when or how you continued on with writing because you've written some great songs too.
Wow. Well, thank you. Um, it's funny because I lived in Brooklyn, and I lived in a housing project, and I had very little money. But I managed to come up with, I think it was $400 to buy an upright piano, and it was awful. It was awful. I think I had a tuner come in and tune it once. But, and again, not a great piano player, but I would sit at that piano and write and write and write. And I really wanted to be a songwriter. That's what I wanted to be. And I'll tell you an interesting story. My father had a friend, and I didn't really know how to describe this. I didn't know who this guy was. Right? So I used to go up, and I'll tell you at the end. I used to go up and visit him. And he was, at the time, that's when people had contractors, and they used to have people write music out by hand. Copyists, they used to call them. And I would go up, and I'd sit with him, and he would tell me great stories. He copied my music for me. He'd listen to my songs. He encouraged me. And then I would leave his office, and I'd go down the hall, and there would be these rooms full of sheet music. And I'd go through the bins, 50 cents, 25 cents for sheet music. It was the Brill Building. And I didn't know the importance of the Brill Building. So I would go up there and sit, and he'd play songs for me. This guy's name was Phil Medley, and he was one of the writers on Twist and Shout, right? Because
Wow.
there were a couple. So I would go see him, and then I'd go downstairs. And what's the very famous? There's a very famous. Now I'm having a senior moment. Very famous record store on the corner, and diagonally across the street was the famous Birdland, where Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and all these people played. So it was an exciting time. It was probably the late 70s because I left and moved to Florida in 80. But it was, when I think back, it was amazing. I got to hang out with a Brill Building songwriter, and I would go in the Brill Building like it was nothing. I went back. They wouldn't let me in the building.
Mm.
I went to the lobby, and I was talking to the guard, and I was telling him these stories, and he's like, I said, so can I come in? He goes, no.
Mm.
So yeah, that was an amazing experience without even realizing it. Yeah.
So what inspired you to move to Florida?
Oh man.
A man.
Yeah. Well, I moved down, and I was only going to stay a week, and 40 years later, 40 years, yeah. Been here for 40 years. 41. December will be 41 years.
41 years.
Yeah. Lived in Florida for 41 years. I'm very happy because what it did was it afforded me opportunity to do things, amazing things, because it was like a playing field was wide open, and I was able to create stuff, make stuff up, and that's what I like to do. So in bands and playing with people, the opportunities for me were endless. So yes, I'm grateful for being here.
Can you tell us about the music scene in the part of Florida that you're in, the Miami area?
Uh, let's see. What can I tell you? Right now, there's not much of a scene
Right.
for anybody, but it was really, really, really interesting. Um, when I first moved to Miami in the 80s, um, it was really like Miami Vice. There were still old people living in those hotels on Ocean Drive. And we would play on the patios of the hotels. They'd wheel out a piano, or you play in the lobby, and it was very, very, very different. It then became, a hip place, and Ocean Drive, a bunch of. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. I had a blues gig with a great guitar player, John Wenzel, who was in my band Little Nicky and the Slicks, and we played a blues brunch on Saturday afternoons. Um, and people like, I remember this, especially Mick Hucknall, Simply Red, was, he'd sit there and listen to us play, and he was very, very sweet and kind. And I think he was part owner of, I don't know, that hotel or someplace, but people were buying up properties. Um, and then they started to revamp all of these places, and then it became like Disneyland. It's very different. There were great clubs. There was a place called Woody's, which everybody associated and thought Ron Wood owned, but he didn't. There was a gentleman, I believe, Woody Graver. A bunch of great people would come. The Stones would come in and hang out in the club, and there were great places that were kind of almost makeshift.
Hmm.
At one time they were like funky clubs, but famous people would. Prince would come down and play. I saw Prince though in L.A. at the old China Club.
Oh,
And
wow.
Prince had a habit of, when he wanted to play, he would just call a club and say, "Hey, can I come down?" That was one of the best shows I ever saw in my life. It was, I mean, I was spitting distance from him. And he sat down and played Nothing Compares to You, which he wrote, Sinead O'Connor recorded, but he sat down and played piano and sang. And it was the band with Rosie Gaines, and they played for about 2 hours. And it was a handful of people. I mean, there were people in the club, but I just felt like this personal, incredible concert. And this stuff cannot be, um, you can't recreate these things. But this would happen in Miami all the time. Famous people would come down and want to jam, and sit in. I think that's how I met Jimmy. Yeah, I met Jimmy I was playing at the Reach, which was down in Key West, and Jimmy came in one night, and he had been partying, so then he came back again when he wasn't partying, and he sat in with us. And then, how did that work? Then I was playing at his club, Margaritaville, and I met him, didn't know him that well. And then he came in one night and he was partying. And he got up and my violin was on the backside of my amp. And he hit my amp and my violin went flying. And the fingerboard went with it.
Oh, boy.
He fixed it. Then I saw him again at a Heat game. I was singing the anthem. And then soon after that, we had dinner and he asked me to join the band. Now, I didn't know much about Jimmy because I'm a New Yorker at this time. I'm still New York in my. And he said, "Well, you have two options. You can play with my band, or you can play with Fingers, who had a band called the Lady Fingers. Great band. Debbie Davies, great blues guitar player, and Geneva Magnus. A bunch of these people went on to great, great players." And I was like, I didn't know. I went, I'll play with you. I didn't know. I had no idea. So that was amazing. I mean, things like that happened in Miami. Another great opportunity was a friend of mine who's a great singer was very, very, very pregnant. I mean, very pregnant. And Albert Lee um, needed a singer. He didn't even need, I just so happened that I played, violin too. So he came and there was a short-lived music chain called Mars Music. I don't know if you guys had a Mars Music.
Maybe.
It was the guy that owned Office Depot. And he used the same concept for a music store. And it was this massive place where people could come in and play, and he had a stage and a sound system. And Albert Lee did an instructional video. So I got to play with Albert Lee, and I sang My Baby Thinks He's a Train with Albert Lee, and a couple other things, and I hung out with him, and he was the sweetest guy on the planet. And he actually came out to he didn't. His wife came out to hear me in L.A. when I was out there performing. So, I mean, the stories are endless. I can go on and on and on about these things. Some really good, some not so great. But it's been a great opportunity for me being here.
And I think a lot of people would maybe have the misconception that South Florida, that's only Cuban music, or it's only, and that would be a misconception because there's all kinds of
Oh,
different musicians in Florida.
yeah. And it's weird because I've been, the last couple of days I've had a discussion about people and Cuban music, or this city is still musically segregated.
Hmm.
And it's sad because, I mean, I'm somebody that plays a lot of different styles of music and have friends in all the camps, so I know. But I was talking to a student who's a teaching assistant for a class I'm teaching, and we got into the subject, and I said, especially with Latin music in South Florida, you really have to know somebody to go to the places where a lot of the music happens.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like you have to know somebody that knows where this club is so you could go and hear some authentic music, played authentically by Cuban musicians or whatever. And the same thing with like Haitian music. You have to know someone, you can go to Little Haiti, but to really hear some of the really good players and stuff, you have to know someone. It's really, really sad to me because that to me is the common denominator between everybody, music, and that's what it's been for me all these years. That's
Hmm.
why I have friends in all the camps. So
Well, we mentioned a few people now, and at the beginning, I was saying that you've recorded or worked with or performed with Dr. John, Dizzy Gillespie, Jimmy Buffett, as we've been saying. Has there been somebody that really, really impressed you?
lots, lots. It's funny. Um, the way I worked with Dr. John was there was a club in Miami called Biscayne Baby, and this place was amazing. We had a really big band, a bunch of University of Miami students, and a bunch of different people, and I sang and played violin. And it was in Coconut Grove. And what it was it was a house band, but they would bring in these, I hate to say oldies, but these like rock and roll stars. Wilson Pickett, oh God, Bo Diddley came. Um, I can't even think of half of the people. But when Dr. John came, that was one of the highlights for me. I sat and talked to him, and he was telling me who he loved. He'd said Irma Thomas was one of his favorite singers, and he was just this really kind of warm, really cool person. Um, and then I got to sing background for him. For me, that was like one of the highlights of my life. Um, so him, another instance, this was not in Miami, but this was in New Orleans. I was on the road with Buffett and Joni Mitchell. You mentioned Joni Mitchell. Joni Mitchell was going to sit in with Jimmy Buffett. in New Orleans. And I think we were at Tipitina's. No, we weren't. It was a benefit
Hmm.
for something else. So everybody else was like, "Oh my God, it's Joni Mitchell." I'm like, I know Big Yellow Taxi. I know both sides now, right? So at one point, and I tell people the story because to me it's great. Everybody left. I don't know where they were. Everybody was gone except Joni Mitchell and I in the tent.
Huh.
And so because I didn't have that starstruck thing about Joni Mitchell, she wrote a song called Cherokee Louise, which I listened to and it blew me away. It was about a Native American girl that had been sexually abused. And so I walked over to her and I asked her about the song. We had about 20 minutes, half hour conversation just about music with nobody around. It was the most, she was another, like one of those instances where you catch people, and you're a peer. You're not a fan, you're not, and you just have an honest, really cool conversation. I didn't know about the alternate tunings and I didn't know all the fancy stuff. I just knew I thought she was really cool.
Hmm.
So we sat and had a really nice conversation and I said, "See you later. I'll sing background for you." "Okay, bye." That was the end of the conversation. But
Wow.
yeah, it's those kind of things to me that are priceless. I can't there's no other way to define it. They're just things that I can't, I couldn't buy. They happen once, and they're, Dizzy. What happened with Dizzy? This was a weird one. I had just bought an album. Dizzy Gillespie had a short-lived record label, and I think I forgot what it was called. Anyway, I bought this record because Stuff Smith, the violinist, was on it, and I really liked it. And I had learned a version of Blue Skies just coincidentally. I'm in Coconut Grove. I'm singing with this big band that I sang with on Monday nights. Who walks in but Dizzy Gillespie? So he's sitting in the audience. So I get up and I sing this song. Not to him. I just sing the song. So he came up and he thanked me, and we were kind of talking, and yeah, I took some pictures with him. But that was it. Went home. My phone rings the next day, and his manager says, "Where are you?" "I'm home." He said, "Why aren't you here on the beach? Dizzy wants you to work with him this week."
Wow.
Now, I'm really, really green, right? I'm really young and I'm really green, you know? So I worked with him for a week. I was so nervous. He was the kindest, most generous person. He paid me. He told me I reminded him of Stuff Smith. And like I said, I can't, I, yeah, no words can ever describe those kind of experiences. And I've had a lot of them. So,
Yeah. Wow. Well, what a story. And I've said several times on this show, Blue Skies is one of my all-time favorite songs.
really, well,
Yeah.
this is a funny version of it. The lyrics were, I'll just recite the beginning of it.
All right.
Up there are blue skies, down there is the sea. Over there is a great big whale, and he's looking at me. I'll tell the world I sure can't swim, but it would take a submarine to outswim him. They were silly lyrics. And so I guess I touched him when I sang them because I don't know who was singing. I don't know if it was Joe Carroll. I don't remember who was singing it, but it was these things you can, like I said, it wasn't, I couldn't script anything quite this amazing. You know what I mean? Just I buy an album over the weekend, and the man that recorded the song walks in. So yeah, really, really, really cool thing.
Well, I want to go back to Jimmy Buffett for a moment.
Okay.
There was an album that you appeared on from him. He had taken a break from recording. He hadn't had a studio album. And then he came back with the legendary producer Russ Kunkel. And you are on the album Fruitcakes.
Yeah.
Different sounding album. Can you recall those sessions?
Yeah. Um, we recorded. I believe we recorded at Compass Point. Yeah, and we went to Nassau and had an incredible collection of amplifiers. I was more impressed with that. Russ was a sweetheart, um, and it was really cool. I sang background on some stuff, and I played violin on uh, I want to say Sunday afternoon. Yeah, and it was really really cool and really nice to be a part of a project like that. And I know that was Fruitcakes was a hit for him. I think I was singing on Fruitcakes too. I don't remember. Yeah, so that was cool.
What was it like being on the road with Buffett and the Coral Reefers?
Um, like a summer vacation playtime. I mean, in the beginning we did buses. By the end, and like the end of my time with him and on, he would fly the band places. Uh, 5-star hotels. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, the greatest accommodations, great band, never had to work very hard. Um, it's a show. So you do the same things every night. Um, but, you're in various cities and you could, after the gig, you could go out and make stuff up. So it was really, really a great experience. He treated the band and all of its members well. The band was consisted of an amazing array of musicians and people, really, really cool people. So, yes, it was a great, I think I did 3 years. Great 3 years.
Well, kind of related to Buffett, there's a compilation album. It's much, much coveted by people because it's harder to find. But the Margaritaville Cafe, I think, late night menu.
Hmm.
If you look on the liner notes, there is a name that comes up the most, and that name is yours because not only is Little Nicky and the Slicks on 2 or 3 tracks, but also you wrote a track that you did with Amy Lee. Your name comes up a lot. And I'm hoping you can tell us about the formation of Little Nicky and the Slicks.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll tell you. I'll go back and tell you that Iana Sokotash, Buffett said to me. Jimmy said, "Can you write a zouk tune?" What tune? Oh, what is zouk? So I had no idea what zouk tune was. I mean, zouk music was, and so I got a really fast lesson in writing. So it was fun to write that song. Oh, Little Nicky and the Slicks. So when I moved to Miami, and my ex husband John was playing drums with a band called Fat Chance Blues Band. Great band, great guys. I'm in touch with all of them, and I love them. And I would sit in with them. Um, and they had a residency, we'll call it, at Tobacco Road, the now defunct Tobacco Road. And I would be there, and I'd sit in, and little by little, I think somebody had called me for a gig, and I kind of borrowed bits and pieces of the band from Fat Chance, and it was a blues festival in Fort Lauderdale at a place called Musicians Exchange, and it was the first gig we'd ever done together, and it went so well that we kind of morphed into this band. Little Nicky and the Slicks, and we became very, very popular in the area. And then we added another guitar player, who's a lawyer, who's now living in Nashville and doing very well. He retired from law and he just plays music. Um, so I had two guitar players and bass, drums, and myself. And it was a popular band, and I loved the band. We traveled, we went to Europe, we recorded, we did a bunch of stuff, and it was. I think it started to wane when I started working with Buffett, um, and another great experience that I can't replicate. You know, so
Well, can you tell us about the inspiration behind one of the songs you wrote? Do nothing, man. Ain't no woman. No, ain't no woman wanna do nothing, man.
don't no woman wanna do nothing, man.
Yep.
Well, um, the the inspiration shall remain nameless, anonymous, totally anonymous. But there was someone I knew that had a partner, a wife, who just didn't get it. She just didn't get it. You know, musician, the life of a musician is, I jokingly say there are musicians and then there's civilians, right? And if a musician marries a civilian, the civilian has to have a sense of humor, patience, because we're a different animal, right? And sometimes it's not about how much money we make or how successful we are, how famous we are. And I think she was kind of banking on him becoming famous and making a lot of money. So the idea behind the song, that's where she really was the inspiration for the song, because she really did live up to it. They're no longer married and haven't been for a long time.
The mystery is now satisfied. So it was based on real life.
Yeah, it really, really was. And trust me. I was like, whoa, okay. And I know it's bad English, don't know woman. It's okay.
Well, have a lot of people told you that they identified with that song?
Nobody would ever admit nobody would ever admit that in a million years. That's funny. No, they haven't. They haven't. That's funny. No. No. It's funny because it's seldom, but there was one song I wrote a long time ago when we had a group called Strings Attached with the great jazz saxophone trumpet player Ira Sullivan. And I wrote a song called Wonderful Sound. And people used to come up to me and say, I know exactly what you mean by that. And I wrote the song. It came. That's another story. But someone gave me a piano, and I sat down and I kind of played through the piano, and the song came to me in one sitting. And so maybe it was divinely inspired. I don't know, but sometimes people read into things, and people would come up and kind of, you know, and I'd look at them like, okay, if that's what it means for you, then then so be it. But yeah, no, no one ever did that to me. So, no.
A lot of times when I'll interview a songwriter, I'll tell them what the song meant to me or what I thought it meant. And it's very, very frequent that the writer will say, I dig what you said, but that is not what the song is about at all.
Yeah,
It happens.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, sometimes it's based like you hear a title in your head. You hear something and then you write around that, or you might hear a lyric and then you write a song based on a lyric, and so it really, I don't know. For me, I'm not the craftsman songwriter. I'm not somebody that sits down. I had friends all my life that sat down and wrote every day, or they wrote for somebody with somebody in mind. And I, for the most part, wrote for myself. I've always written for myself. Now, a couple of people have recorded my songs, which makes me feel good. But I generally write for myself, you know. So I did come up with a crazy rendition of. I took Led Zeppelin's "When the Levee Breaks," and these boots are made for walking, and combined them, and they work. It worked really cool. So somebody recorded that arrangement. So, but yeah,
Interesting. I'd
it
like to
worked.
hear that.
It's actually I have to find it. We recorded it somewhere, but I have to find her version. She was from uh, maybe from the Netherlands, and there
Hmm.
was a producer, a rock producer that liked the arrangement and said, "I want to do it." I don't. I have the CD around here somewhere. I have no idea where it is now, but yeah, I've had all kinds of. Um, I will tell you a story because I've been telling this to my music business classes and my evolution of rock class, and it's an interesting story, and it's a tale of woe, sort of, but it's actually kind of funny. Not really. I had a Milli Vanilli moment. Remember Milli
Right?
Vanilli?
Oh, of course.
All right. So this is a great story. So Little Nicky and the Slicks had gone to Europe. And it was weird because I remember now that it was around the time of the Gulf War. And there was a lot of, just a bunch of things went wrong. Right? And so we come home. And we're just kind of like, So one of the guitar players from the band and I were playing in Coconut Grove, just a duo gig, and these guys come, these two guys come by, and I'm forgive my accent, it's not the greatest, but and the guy says, "Hello, my name is Alex, and I'm from Germany." That he said it right, so I said, "Hi, Alex, from Germany," and he said to me, and I quote, "Can you sing like Martha Wash?" Now we all know the Martha Wash story, right? You know about CNC Music Factory, and all right, I'll tell you about it. Anyway, so I went, sure. Martha Wash is an amazing singer. In fact, Martha Wash is It's Raining Men.
Ah, okay.
Okay, that's Martha Wash. And Martha Wash is this amazing session singer who sang with Sylvester back in the disco days. Amazing voice. They were called Two Tons of Fun. Amazing voice. In fact, Paul Schaefer produced It's Raining Men. Do I sing like her? No. I think she's great. Anyway, so yeah, sure, why not? So he says, he takes my information. It was so long ago that we were still like faxing stuff, right? So I take his information, and just for the giggles, I sent him a note, right? When I got home, he sent me the information. He bought plane tickets. He said, "I'll fly you to Hamburg. I will pay you X amount of dollars," and it was a sizable amount of money. "Come over and sing some songs." Right? So I had a friend that musician here in town from Germany. He said, "Oh, they always ask these American singers to come over and sing, and probably won't amount to anything." I was like, "Okay." So I go over, and I had to be back, so I stayed a day and a half, and I sang 5 songs, maybe 5, 6. I don't know. It was a bunch of songs. And this one song, I'm sitting there and I'm listening to it, and I'm like, it sounds like this. Da 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 da. That sounds like Time After Time. So I look at the guy and I start singing Time After Time. And he kind of smirks and, so I sing the song. So I sing the song. He said, now, if any of these songs hit, I'll pay you additional money.
Hmm.
Now, all of these songs sounded like this to me. Boom, 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 right?
Got it.
Like German dance club music, right?
Right.
And I'm like, okay, whatever. You know, I make money, I walk away, nothing. And I signed, and I still have the documents. I signed away the rights to anything. Come home. So my ex-husband says to me, did you ever check the charts to see if any of that stuff charted? I said, no, because I didn't really think it was that good. So we were in Borders, still was Borders at the time. We were in Borders. I go over and I pick up a Billboard magazine. The song charted. The one I sang for you charted in several countries in the
Wow.
top 10.
In the top 10.
So I immediately go, where's my money? A bunch of things happened. The song hit, and in part, there was copyright infringement. And Cyndi Lauper's camp, stopped. I was going to sue them. And then she got writing credit on the song. The song was a massive hit.
Hmm.
All right. So he says, all right, so you'll come back, you'll do more songs. So I go back and I do more songs. But here's the catch. And I'll show you, I'll send you a link to the videos. You can see yourself. It's me. But it's not me.
I see.
There's someone lip syncing to me.
Ah. What?
Yes. And I mean, this was a massive hit, right? So I go back and I meet the person who is me. She's a dancer. And she said, I hope they never ask me to sing live because I can't sing at all.
Wow.
I couldn't make this up. This is what I'm saying. This is my life. This is, the things that happen. So she said, are you angry? I said, I might be if I lived in Hamburg, but not really. So they paid me a ton of money. And the second record didn't do nearly as good as the first. But there were hits on the first one. Now, that was late 90s. So you say, it's 20 years. I went back and looked. This guy is still making money on that massive hit he had. He's still making money. And he has other people being me now. I mean, but they're actually singing.
Hmm.
And so I sent him an email, a message the other day. I said, you might as well have me be faceless again and pay me to come back out. You use my voice, I don't care. But I said this and I tell my students this because this business is very interesting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With Martha Wash, she went back and sued C&C Music that Everybody Dance Now is her. Right?
Huh.
But the model is about as big as my arm. You know what I mean? And real model-esque. But she's this big, rotund woman that doesn't look like this model. But her voice, you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
they did that with me. And I could care less. But if I knew what I know now, I would have asked for points or something, some kind of residuals, because they paid me a flat rate and sent me packing. And they're still making money years later. So it's a life lesson. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
There's lots of young people out there giving music away, for nothing. The whole story of like Otis Blackwell gave his publishing to Colonel Parker for Elvis songs. He wrote Fever. He wrote Heartbreak Hotel. He wrote Jailhouse Rock. He wrote all these songs, and he basically gave the songs. He still owned the writers,
Right.
but he gave the publishing to Colonel Parker. And Elvis's name is Elvis didn't write the songs. Otis Blackwell, a little teeny black man, wrote the songs. A lot of people don't know about him. So, and in my years of experiencing knocks from every different angle, I have these experiences to share with students, and says, I wouldn't trade anything that's happened to me ever.
Hmm.
But I have these stories to share with my students and say, don't do what I did.
You've been there. They can learn from that.
Yeah. I mean, there's been, I guess because I do have a gift. I was blessed with a gift. And people are, how can I say it? Um, People will take advantage.
Yeah.
Very simple. If you, I always ask people, my students, please learn the business. Know that it is the music business, and the business part is very important. And just don't walk into anything. Don't sign your rights away to things. Go to a lawyer. Ask for help. Ask for advice. Don't be impatient. Just yeah.
Hmm.
So
Well, this might be a tough question, but I would be very curious to know if you could go back and tell Nicole Yarling when you were starting in the music business, if you could tell her something, what would you say to her?
be your crazy creative self for the rest of your life. I don't think I really, to be honest with you, I don't really think there's much I would change. I mean, was my life perfect? No. Is it over? No, it's not over. I'm not going anywhere. Um, but I wouldn't change anything about my life. I really wouldn't. I think I was having a conversation with a friend earlier today, and we say, things happen for a reason. And sometimes they're good things and sometimes they're not. But as long as you learn from the good and the bad, then it's worth whatever the experience was, I guess. And so, no, I wouldn't. I would tell me to continue to be my usual crazy self and just continue to love what you do. And when it becomes, a friend and I were having this conversation. When it becomes a job for you, it's time to do something else.
Hmm.
You know, it's not a job. It's my life. It's what I do. And people say, "Oh, don't your career?" No, no, nah. I wake up every morning and I'm thinking about music and I'm writing stuff, and so it makes me happy.
When somebody takes a class with you,
Uh-huh.
is there something that you want them to take from? I mean, I'm sure there's several things, but is there like a greater thing that you want them to walk away with it from?
Yeah,
What's that?
it's funny because I taught, like I said, this evolution of rock class. This is a perfect example. This summer is for non-majors. These people are business people or sports people, athletes, or whatever, and they could care less. This is a basket weaving class, you know. And I'm talking about music from the beginning of early America through, and I don't know whoever designed this class ended music in the 80s, but that's a long story for another day. But these are babies now. I'm looking at them, they're like late teens, early 20s. So the music I'm talking about is the music of their parents and their grandparents. So I don't try to burden them with a lot of like big books to read and facts and figures, and no, because I know what'll happen. They'll shut down and their eyes will glaze over and they could care less. So I try in every class, I try to share my love and my passion, right? And based in fact, I use facts, but I try to come at it from an angle. I tell them stories. um, of things that I know firsthand and that I'm not making up. I include a lot of visual stuff because when you talk about a Victrola to a 20-year-old, they've never seen a Victrola. Most of them, a lot of them haven't even really seen. They know turntables now because they're back in fashion. But you have to engage people, and we live in a very visual society now. People want stuff now, and they want it immediately, and they want to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. So the best. I said all of that to say this: the best reward I got. My class was small. During the regular school year, it's like 160 people. The summer class was 13 people. I got some of the best emails at the end of the class. They said, I hate rock and roll guitar, but now I don't hate it. It was my parents' music. I don't listen to it, but now you've opened my ears and now I'm starting to listen to it. Somebody today sent me a picture. They're in Disney, uh, and they went by the House of Rock. You know what I mean? The
The Hard Rock Cafe?
not the Hard Rock.
The House of
The
Blues?
House of Blues. Thank you, Brain. They went by the House of Blues, and they sent me a picture. And so I get these emails from students, and you think you're boring them to tears with your stories, and they're like, "We really enjoyed the class." So I had students in China, and I did.
Hmm.
So and at the end of I've had people say, "Hey, are you teaching any other classes?"
Hmm.
So yeah, so it's like I said, as animated and as crazy as I appear to be. I try to share people. I try to share my passion with people. And I think people, like I said in the beginning of our conversation, people read sincerity. And even if they're not interested, if you're sincere about it and they see you're passionate, they buy in.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I love this stuff. I really do. I love talking about it. I love experiencing it. I love, sharing this with my students. So yes, what I want them to take away is um, understanding the love of of the music, knowing a little bit more about the music, and listening to the music with a different set of ears. You know what I mean? Not just kind of listening at it because it's in the car. When you listen to it, you'll think about me. When you hear the Beatles, you'll think about me. When you hear Led Zeppelin, you'll think about me. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? And you'll think about what we talked about in class. So yeah, uh, that's what I do. And I lecture older adults too, and I work with little kids, but the passion level stays the same. I don't care who it is. So,
Well, there's one side street before we go that I almost forgot about this, but
oh,
I have an album. I used to play this on the radio, and I think the title, it's the An Evening with it's you and it might be called Williams and Yarling, An Evening with. Am I?
wait, is it the Manchester Craftsmen's Guild? Is it the Joe Williams album?
The Joe Williams album? Yes.
Oh,
Can you
yeah,
tell us about that recording?
yeah, and all right, all right. That's very very special to me. Um, Years and years and years ago, there was a gentleman in South Florida named Joe Rowland, played vibes. And he was really gruff and he talked like this. Sweetheart.
Hmm.
And I used to go and sit in with him when I first moved down here, and he said, "Yeah, if you ever record anything, I've got a friend." Everybody has a friend, right? So 10 years after he said that to me, I was doing Art Deco weekend, and it was freezing, and it was just the right combination of people. And I said, let's go in and record. And the bass player, another one of those strange coincidences, the bass player was leaving. He just got a job with the Pittsburgh Symphony. So we went in and recorded. And I called Joe. I said, hey, Joe, I finally recorded. So, I don't know if this guy's still alive.
Hmm.
So he sends it to this guy named John Levy. And so I had no idea who John Levy was. And just a quick aside, I'm going to move over here for a second. I was working in a club, and I just told somebody the story today. And I'm sitting, they used to play videos on the break. So I'm sitting there, and I'm talking to somebody, and I look like this over my shoulder, and there's Joe Williams with Peggy Lee, and I had no idea where they were. And I said to whoever I was talking to, I said, man, I wish I were her. So fast forward. He sent it to John Levy. John Levy managed Nancy Wilson, at one point Arsenio Hall, all of these people. Amazing. He was the first African American manager in jazz. He played with George Shearing, played with a bunch of people, played with Billie Holiday when she got out of prison. That
Wow.
the Carnegie Hall concert. Anyway, so he liked what he heard, and he introduced me to Joe. Now, I just told you that story, right? Almost a year, and I can't make these things up. Almost a year to the day that I said that about, I was on stage with Joe Williams. And we became fast friends. And then John Levy set this thing up so that I could go and record with Joe Williams in Pittsburgh, where the bass player just got the gig with the Pittsburgh Symphony. So that CD is from Manchester Craftsman's Guild. Beautiful facility in Pittsburgh. So we go and we record 2 days. Now the idea was I was going to go out on the road with Joe, and then he was going to introduce me to his audience, and then I could go back and play his circuit. But a bunch of things happened. Joe, all right. So I didn't see Joe for a long time. Then I saw Joe at downtown Miami with the Basie Band. I went down to hear him. I sat in and sang with him, and that was the last time I saw him alive. He had emphysema, and he got sick in Seattle, and he went home, and they gave him some medicine that made him disoriented. And he got up out of the hospital bed and decided he was going to go home. Now, he was hopped up on some crazy medicine that made him really disoriented. He couldn't breathe. He was on a oxygen tank. And he's living in Vegas. He walked out of the hospital, put his clothes on. The nurse let him go. And he told the nurse he was going out to smoke a cigarette. Does this make sense? So he gets up and he walks. And he walked. And he walked. And he dropped in the street and died. And they found him. John Levy called me and told me that Joe walked out of the hospital and no one knew where he was. And so later on that day, he called me back and said, well, they found him, he's dead. And that's how he told me.
Mm.
That's the same way I found out about my mom, through a phone message. So the phone messages are bad. So anyway, so I go to the funeral in Vegas. And I'm sitting there, and all of his famous friends, Robert Goulet and Nancy Wilson and Diane Shure, all of these people, it's 500 people there. And I'm sitting there, and this guy gets up and says, how did he say it? He said, when Basie left, when Joe left the Basie band, Basie took a night off, took the train with Joe up to Boston, to a club up there, and the marquee read in small letters, Count Basie Presents, and in big letters, Joe Williams. Well, that CD reads, Joe Williams Presents Nicole Yarling. And I didn't know it. I had no idea. He never told me what he was doing. I didn't know that he did the same thing for me that Basie did for him. And so I cried like a baby. And then I waited a couple of years, actually, and asked his manager, John, and his wife, would it be okay if I wrote a book? So I interviewed, I wrote a book. It's not published. That's a whole story for another. But I interviewed amazing groups of the people. I even interviewed Bill Cosby a long time ago. 2 weeks before, it was about 2 weeks before he made some off-color statement. And this is going back a lot of years. So I interviewed Lou Rawls. I interviewed just a ton of people. And yeah, so the book wasn't published. I still have it. And I think I'm going to do something with it myself. But that was part of the reason why I work with kids, part of the reason why I teach, part of the reason why I share, because someone did something very, very special for me. And the only way I can keep what I have is by giving it away and sharing with somebody else. And so everybody that I work with, all the kids that I work with, and a lot of them have gone on to do great things, I tell them, the important thing, the only thing I want from you, I don't want money, I don't want anything. All I want you to do is to turn around and help somebody else. That's all. So, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I've been blessed in my life with people that saw things in me that I couldn't see in me. And, this has been my whole life. So, yeah, thanks for asking me about that, because, I still tell people that that's very important to me. And it's not just a recording. It's everything that happened around the recording that is very, very important to me, and was an impetus for me to teach all these years and to go pretty much in a direction that I've gone in.
Well, I'm glad that I asked that question. I have that CD. It's somewhere in there. I'm going to leave in just a bit, and I'm gonna take that out and listen to it.
Thank you. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of things I'm proud of, but that's one thing that, yeah, just the whole, when Joe passed away, people said to me, "Oh, you poor thing." No, I'm here. There's nothing, and I had a life before Joe. I had a career and I was doing things before Joe. And people, and that's what was important to me. That's why I waited a couple of years before I approached anybody about anything, because I didn't want people to think that I was being opportunistic. You know what I mean? Here is somebody with a big heart that wanted to do some kind for me, and I'm grateful for that. But I didn't want to, rest on that and use that, as an opportunity per se. I just saw somebody with a big heart that was being kind to me and believed in what I was doing, And that's how I looked at it. I didn't look at it like, okay, cash cow, let's go. There are lots of people that would, but that was never it for me, ever.
Well, Nicole Yarling, thank you so much for spending time with us. Thank you.
Thanks for letting me rattle on.
I've enjoyed it, and I'm excited to see what happens with this book.
Yeah, you know what I think I'm going to do is I think I'm either going to narrate it myself and take portions of it, and I may upload it to the internet in segments because his life is really really interesting. The interesting thing about him, I'll tell you this real quick, is he appeared on like Carson, the Tonight Show, and just on television, commercials. He was probably one of the most visible and invisible people in the business. He took a picture of Sinatra. There's a picture of Sinatra, a famous picture of Sinatra with a goatee. That was his picture. These people were his peers and his friends. And so that's why I waited and didn't self publish the book, because I felt like he deserved the same accolades as Ella and Sarah. These were his friends. These were his peers. They weren't, he wasn't like tier B. These were people, these were his equals. And so that's why I didn't do that. But I think now there's some other stuff going on with it, but I think now I'm going to do it for myself, and just take little bits and pieces of the book and offer it, because I think his story is very very interesting. It's not my story. My connection with him is beautiful and all, but I just think, um, especially as jazz singers, he's somebody that he alone with there's a bunch of other singers that will be forgotten. You know what I mean? Because no one will ever forget Tony Bennett. No one will ever forget Frank Sinatra. And no one will ever forget Ella or Sarah or Billie Holiday. But there's a wealth of other great singers that unless somebody talks about them, you won't hear it. They'll wither away. And he was a very, very powerful singer and a great person. So I think it's important that I do that.
Well, I commend you for keeping the names of these people like Joe Williams out there.
Yeah,
And it's been a real joy to talk to you. I hope we have a chance to talk again.
thank you, Paul. Thank you so much for having me. This was really a joy.
My pleasure.
All righty.